Yeah, they're looking okay. Like from our point of view, like there's obviously there's a lot of uncertainty everywhere at the moment. Very, very challenging period for sport, I think in general. You see so many games being, postponed or cancelled, whatever the case may be. So um this thing is very, very different. So Omicron is very, very different to what we probably experienced before. Um, we've had a number of players and staff, myself included, who've picked up Omicron, and have had different periods of isolation, which has been a challenge, particularly this time of year. Um, I suppose there's lots of chat around our Montpellier game, okay, around Europe and some of the things that took place that week. Happy to discuss all of that. And into Munster then as well the following week. And that for me was always going to be the very, very tricky week because if you think the game on St. Stephen's Day, the 26th, and because we're testing roughly 100 people most weeks, and yeah, we've had a number of people have tested positive, so a good chunk of people, and some of those people have come through the 10 days already, so they're back in action, and in theory they're good to go now. So with the social gatherings that take place for most people on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in particular, and if you think even for if we have a group that's due to go to Limerick on the 26th of roughly 40 people, like that game for me was always going to be a huge challenge because of the amount of, I guess, contacts. So even now we've guys that are being pinged now as close contacts to various different people. I'm sure you're all experiencing that to some degree yourselves anyway. So um, and when those take place and when you're alerted of, so it's not even just yourself, but it's also all the people you've been in contact with. So for me, that game was always going to be quite tricky. So we've had another round of testing, and because the testing system, everyone's reading all the headlines. We're experiencing the same challenges that every other person is in terms of delay in getting some of the results back. So they're coming back in dribs and drabs. Um, but the picture is, yeah, like it's not amazing if you're to say what this is the situation going to be in a number of weeks ago, but we're slowly but surely getting through it now. And thankfully, people. I don't want to trivialize this in any way, but from my own personal experience, having come through it now, I was okay. Very, very mild symptoms to the point where only the fact that you're testing, I probably wouldn't have really known is the honest answer. But yeah, it plays challenges more for people around family and what you can do in terms of decision making. So it's not just even from a work point of view; it's also then from a family point of view. And as in I know because my wife and children headed down the country separate to me, and they were isolated. They've tested. And they thankfully been negative, but I've been isolating from them over the last few days. So everyone's had their challenges. Is the reality. We've had a good chunk of cases. I'm not going to go specifics numbers. We can at some point, maybe in the future, but obviously because we're in this testing cycle even today, and I can't even tell you exactly the full results of those tests because the guys that haven't got the results back yet aren't allowed to come back in yet. But we'll still have a good chunk of players that have either tested positive previously on back training now, or have tested negative already this morning, and they're going to rejoin the squad as well. So, yeah, it's a very challenging period. How you best go about managing the situation, that's the no, none of us have been through this before. So, it's hard to look at any data from elsewhere because nobody has any. So, we just have to make kind of smart decisions for the group and crack on as best we possibly can.
And just lastly, could I ask you about, we obviously haven't had the chance to speak to you since the Montpellier game was cancelled. Can you bring us up to speed on where things are? Like it was reported, Leinster were going to appeal the decision to nullify the result and give Montpellier the points. Can you just bring us up to speed on where we are at that stage?
Yeah, well, the way I understand it, so like with the games, the way it played out over those few days, because our game was due to be on the Friday, we were one of the first teams up, so to speak. And, like we knew we had some cases, we had a meeting with EPCR on the Wednesday, like we had expressed some concerns about the game because you could see the situation. And as it is not just internally, this is just everywhere, and how things were changing quite quickly. And it really brought us back to the early, the first signs when the initial lockdown, it was like when we were getting ready to go to South Africa that time, if you remember back to that original March time. So it's what, over 18 months ago now, nearly coming up to 2 years ago. And a lot of our players have seen the Munster situation, and the other URC teams getting stuck in South Africa. To go into France, the players had to sign a form about, being spot tested basically in France, and if you were to show a positive test, that they'd stay there for 10 days and isolate. So there was a lot of concern about getting stuck in France. So, and then you could hear the following day as it played out, we did our team run and we shifted our flight to the Friday, etc., etc. And, the message for us was to crack on with the group that we had. And that's obviously what we did. So, and then on the Thursday, obviously when the game gets called, that's slightly before, but you're down to hours now, where things again are changing. And I guess there's a whole block of games now are getting rearranged. So, you hope that common sense will prevail and that people that have had games cancelled, get an opportunity to play them. The good thing is there's still 7 weekends of European action left. So how Europe go about reconfiguring the tournament, we'll wait and see. But obviously they're working away in the background, I believe. But you'd hope that some level of common sense will prevail and everyone gets a fair crack at trying to play the games. Because at the end of the day, COVID's going to hit everybody at various different stages, particularly with this new variant. You see across top 14, URC, Premiership, like everyone's having games not being played over the course of the last couple of weekends. And so it really just depends on when it hits, rather than if it hits. I think everyone's going to be affected at some point. So that would certainly be the hope.
And so just to confirm, Leinster have appealed the decision to cancel the game rather than postpone.
Well, there's not really a proper appeals process. That's the whole issue. But now the fact that the tournaments, because from the previous appeals process, there was due to be no free weekends, whereas now we know that there is a likelihood that the tournament is going to get reshaped. Is that the best way of putting it? So I think we all understand what that means. Okay. So yeah, the hope would be, as I said, common sense will prevail, and we want to get cracking with playing games at some point. As I said, like it's just the challenge because every team is getting affected at a slightly different time. We did everything we could to try and get the game played. Shifting flights, testing on the Thursday and the Friday, etc., etc. So that's been well documented at this point in time. So, and there's plenty of conversations that have gone on in the background as well.
All right, thanks, Leo, and good luck this week.
Leo, hi, it's Michael Corcoran here. I'm just wondering, given the fact that you're waiting for test results, some people are in, other people are out. How's training going to be organised today? How's that going to be run today?
Well, with the coaches that are there, basically, so Stuart is leading the charge today. So he's a good chunk of guys out there training today. So and it's just getting the group back together now and getting ready for Ulster this weekend, and and control what we can control. So to be fair to our guys, they've been isolated in their separate groups or families or whatever way that is. We've lost probably a couple of guys to close contacts even, and that stuff is sort of becoming, like if everyone is on this call, as an example, is having Christmas dinner with 10 other people. I had my Christmas dinner on my own, so I didn't have that problem. But so of the 9 other people that you're on that having your Christmas dinner with, and one of them bings up as a positive result, and then you have to do your whatever it is, 10 days off the back of that, depending on what your level of contact has been. So yeah, it's a messy situation, but that's just the way society is at the moment. So for our guys, we just need to make sure we're comfortable in the uncertainty and control we can control. So we'll have a group that'll be able to train today, and that have come through. So either they've done their 10 days or they have come through negative. So that group will crack on.
Is it a different challenge than this year, given the fact that normally at Christmas time, you're looking at who you're going to leave out? I mean, this weekend and the last couple of weeks, you're looking at who you're going to include, because, I mean, weeks are going by and players aren't playing games of rugby.
Yeah, like it's ever changing. Yeah, like and our game got called off very early, our Munster game. Like, and I'd been pushing out, obviously this point, like particularly off the back of the decision the previous week. So, and knowing some of the social events that were coming up as well, like as in that's just can't be avoided. A lot of our guys are still living at home with with families. So, they're sharing accommodation with other people of similar ages that not necessarily from a rugby setting. So, but yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge this time of year. The Ulster Connacht game got called off later. Again, I don't know what the situation is with those two teams. I kind of got the impression from the release that it was from Ulster, but again, I haven't heard a huge amount from what's going on there. And then even that Scottish game getting called off very late in the day as well. So again, I don't know the ins and outs as exactly when teams are testing and when the results are coming back, etc., etc. So it's that's the whole. I guess the inconsistency of it, like you could have 10 players out, but then you could go into with a 23 into a match day fully clear, but after the game, 10 of them might test positive. Another day, none of them might test positive afterwards. So there's no way of really knowing. But all we can do is follow the protocols and procedures that have been laid out.
Okay, good man. Cheers.
Hey Leo, sorry to hear about your predicament. Can I just briefly ask, like, when are you hoping to get out of isolation? If you don't mind saying, if you do, that's no issue.
I'll be out later in the week, so I'll be out before the game. So I'm pushing. So even though I've been I've been antigen negative for the last 3 days. So my symptoms are incredibly mild. Incredibly mild, which is the good thing, I guess. It's just, as you can see, like it's just operationally everything it's incredibly challenging at the moment. But like we're rugby, you think of what the medical system is at the moment, and that's probably the much bigger concern, really. Different industries being understaffed manpower wise at different stages. So yeah, like our sort of seem very insignificant to what other stuff that's going on out there at the moment. So we'll crack on. Again, guys have been working away in their own time. Some guys have been out with COVID. Generally speaking, very, very mild symptoms. It was always, if you think back, even playing games at this time of year, or more recently in coaching teams at this time of year, like there's so many colds and flus and bugs and all the rest. Always was always the thing, and you get reports on guys and you see guys and you're sort of asking, can you crack on, and then you see them come down sometimes for breakfast, or when you see them you're like, this guy doesn't look well. So having played before previously personally, when you're not 100% or you're struggling, you're like, what's the point of playing sometimes like that? So I was always used to err on the side of, let's pull this person out of here, because you don't want to make them worse, whatever the case may be. So it's something we've always battled with. Now it's different because obviously with COVID, the testing and all the rest, it becomes a bit more clear cut. So even if the people have very mild symptoms, they're still getting pulled. People with household contacts that could potentially be out for 10 days don't pick up anything, and they're still out for 10 days. So it's a bit of a minefield. I used that word before, minefield, but it's uncertain, unclear, and all we can do is just try and crack on as best we possibly can.